In 1956, Swedish engineer Sven Berge presented a revolutionary tank project to the military leadership. Everyone thought he had gone crazy. Generals laughed, experts shook their heads, and foreign specialists called it a technical absurdity. A tank without a turret was seen as self-propelled artillery, not a real combat tank. But 10 years later, that insane machine was in service with the Swedish Army, and 20 years on, British and American tank crews tested it and recognized it as revolutionary. How was one person able to persuade an entire country to build a tank that defied all the rules of tank design? And why did this strange machine serve for 30 years despite predictions of its failure? The Cold War was gaining momentum, and tiny neutral Sweden found itself in a very difficult position. To the east loomed the threat of the Soviet Union with its thousands of tanks, while Sweden's own tank fleet looked dismal. They were armed with British Centurions, huge 3-meter-tall giants weighing 50 tons, barely reaching 35 kilometers an hour. These lumbering monsters were unsuitable for defending Sweden's forests and lakes. A need arose for their own tank, adapted specifically for Swedish terrain. In the early 1950s, the Swedish Ministry of Defense launched a program to develop a new heavy tank, codenamed KRV. The requirements were ambitious: a weight of about 30 tons, powerful armament, good protection, and high mobility. The consortium of companies LN Verb Volvo and Bofors proposed a design with a massive 155mm gun in a rotating turret. The project looked impressive on paper, but had one major problem: cost. The KRV program required colossal investments that Sweden, a small nation, simply could not afford. In 1953, when Britain unexpectedly agreed to sell Centurions directly, the KRV project was formally frozen, but unofficial discussions continued. The military understood that Centurion was a temporary solution, not a long-term answer to Sweden's defense needs. At that moment, Sven Berge stepped onto the scene. A 40-year-old engineer working in the Royal Army's Weapons Department, he was involved in inspecting tank production. But Berge was more than just an official. He was a reserve officer who had driven tanks and understood that problems from the inside. Most importantly, Berge was fluent in Swedish, English, French, German, and Russian. This multilingual ability allowed him to study specialized literature and original technical reports from around the world, gleaning insights from military research and tank design. In summer 1956, Berge finished analyzing reports on tank losses during World War II and the Korean War. The statistics were shocking. The risk of being hit in battle directly depended on the height of the machine. Over half of all tank losses resulted from turret penetrations. Berge came to a radical conclusion: any new tank should be as low as possible. The simplest way to achieve this was to remove the turret altogether. On October 22, 1956, Berge filed a patent application titled Notification of Swedish Invention. The document described a technical solution for gun aiming using the tank's tracks. The idea was seemingly crazy. Instead of a rotating turret, the entire tank would turn on the spot for horizontal aiming, while a special suspension would raise and lower the entire hull for vertical aiming. When Berge presented his basic concept to his department head, Hjorglund, and the head of the Vehicle Bureau, Eric Gilner, their reaction was cold and skeptical. A tank without a turret sounded like a step backward to the 1930s, reminiscent of assault guns and anti-tank self-propelled guns. But Berge was incredibly convincing in his presentation. He not only proposed removing the turret, but also introduced a whole philosophy of tank design based on real battlefield loss data. He studied the successes of World War II tank destroyers and assault guns like the Sturmgeschütz and Jagdpanzer, which demonstrated exceptional defensive effectiveness thanks to their low profiles and excellent maneuverability. He also examined the French B-1 hull, with its precise transmission allowing for turretless gun aiming. Burge aimed to combine these advantages: a low profile, excellent maneuverability, and precise aiming, all in one machine. However, achieving this required a fully automated transmission and a revolutionary suspension system. Despite skepticism, Burge received permission to continue development. The military understood that if his concept worked, Sweden would get a tank that was cheaper to produce but with comparable combat effectiveness. By 1957, the situation changed again. The KRV program was finally abandoned due to issues with armament, and the military began exploring alternatives. That spring, work started on 3 different designs. The first, called Stridsvagn A, followed the British-American tank building school, a 42.5-ton machine with a tall silhouette and a power-to-weight ratio of about 20 horsepower per ton. The second, Stridsvagn T, followed the French-German approach, a lighter 32-ton tank with thinner armor but high mobility, with 30 to 35 horsepower per ton. The third was Burge's concept, designated Stridsvagn C, where Stre meant low profile in Swedish. All 3 variants were to be armed with a 105mm gun, but only the C option excluded a turret. For the military, it was an insane experiment. For Burge, it was a chance to prove he was right. To test the feasibility, Burge ordered Bofors to create a prototype of the suspension and transmission system. Engineers used scrapped American Sherman tanks and Swedish ICV-103 assault guns, installing experimental hydropneumatic suspensions. The results exceeded expectations. The system worked perfectly. It could precisely raise and lower the hull, enabling gun aiming in elevation. For further testing, the suspension was mounted on a chassis from an unfinished project, with 2 road wheels removed to approximate the future tank design.
In 1958, the Swedish parliament debated which of the 3 options to choose. The discussion was heated. Supporters of the A variant pointed to its proven reliability. Advocates of the T emphasized its excellent mobility. Berg argued that only his turretless tank could combine low cost, good protection, and sufficient firepower for Swedish conditions. The decision was unexpected. Parliament chose option C, despite it being the most expensive of the 3. Why? Because this tank held symbolic value. As a neutral country, Sweden wanted to showcase its industrial prowess to the world. Creating a fundamentally new tank design, unique and unprecedented, was a matter of national pride. Bofors was awarded the contract to build 2 prototypes, named S1 and S2. LVN built the transmissions and Volvo assembled the engines. The S1 prototype was powered by an electric motor for testing the suspension, armed with a British 105mm L7 gun. The most remarkable fact, this was the only tank in the Stridsvagn family to receive a turret, a temporary one with a 20mm automatic cannon. To keep the true design secret, the body was covered with sheet metal, hiding the real structure from prying eyes. Work progressed rapidly. The Swedes also developed the armament and powertrain alongside the tank. Experimental vehicles were to be fitted with a 360 horsepower Rolls-Royce K60 diesel engine and a 300 horsepower Boeing 502 gas turbine, the first time a turbine was installed on a production tank. In autumn 1958, Bofors presented initial design sketches. The vehicle resembled a low wedge, almost flat at the front. Its length was similar to the Emil project, but beyond that, the resemblance ended. The Stridsvagn S was 70 centimeters wider and 40 centimeters taller. The estimated weight was around 31 tons. The engine and transmission were placed at the front, another unconventional decision. The engine unit was to be a hybrid, a 300 horsepower diesel for normal driving and a 200 to 300 horsepower gas turbine for high speeds and tough terrain. The armament was also unusual, a fixed gun in the hull with an automatic loading system fed from rear ammunition racks. The crew could be reduced to 2 or even 1 person. No loader was needed. But how many people were actually needed to operate this machine? And what issues arose in initial trials of the prototypes? On January 3, 1961, Berg received American patent number 2968828 for his active suspension. By then, the military had officially adopted the Stridsvagn S as the main direction for Swedish tank development. However, the A variant was not entirely abandoned. Bofors continued working on both projects in parallel. The first S1 prototype was turned into a demonstration suspension stand with an electric motor and armed with a British 105mm L7 gun.
The only Stridsvagn 103 to temporarily receive a turret was fitted with a 20mm automatic gun. The body was covered with sheet metal to hide the true design during testing. Meanwhile, the Swedes developed the armament and powertrain further. They planned to equip the tanks with a 360 horsepower Rolls-Royce diesel and a 300 horsepower Boeing gas turbine, creating the world's first serial tank with a gas turbine engine, years ahead of the Soviet T-80 and the American Abrams. The tank could become fully amphibious in 25 minutes, deploying a foldable pontoon. Its tracks allowed it to move through water at 6.5 kilometers per hour. In 1964, the Army ordered 70 serial units. The first Stridsvagn 103As arrived in 1967. But then it was discovered that the 300 horsepower Boeing turbine was insufficient. Its specific power was only 14 horsepower per ton, instead of the planned 18. In 1970, production began on the B version with a Caterpillar turbine producing 490 horsepower, bringing total power to 730 horsepower. All earlier tanks were upgraded to this standard, and by the end of 1971, 290 tanks had been built. But how did crews respond to this strange machine? In 1967, Norway compared Stridsvagn 103 with the German Leopard 1. With closed hatches, the Swedish tank detected more targets and fired faster. In 1968, the British Bovingdon Tank School tested the vehicle for 6 months and acknowledged that the radical concept had significant advantages. British tank creators praised the innovative design. In 1973, the British Army conducted maneuvers with Stridsvagn 103. The technical readiness never dropped below 90%. The final report stated no inability to fire on the move was demonstrated. In 1975, Americans tested the tank at Fort Knox. Stridsvagn 103 outperformed the M60 in accuracy, despite being slower, only half a second behind. Critics argued it was suitable only for defense, but Sweden's doctrine was aggressive. The platoons equipped with Stridsvagn 103 were called assault units, designed for counterattacks against airborne landings. Its low profile protected the crew during offensive operations, not just passive defense. All 3 crew members could drive and fire. Even if 2 were lost, the tank remained combat-ready. One of the tank's secret features, revealed only in 1992, was a special mesh armor mounted on the front, a metallic grid a certain distance from the main hull. Designed to prematurely detonate shaped charges and anti-tank missiles, this protection was kept highly secret. When a shaped charge hit the grid, it would either explode early or damage the fuse, preventing penetration. Tests showed high effectiveness against AT missiles and RPGs of the 1970s. Additional protection was provided by fuel canisters along the sides, serving as both extra fuel tanks and anti-kamikaze screens. Swedes thought through their defenses meticulously. By the 1980s, the problem arose that Soviet tanks, like the T-72, with new sub-caliber ammunition, could pierce the frontal armor of Stridsvagn 103 from front to rear. In 1980, the Army demanded the retirement of all tanks and their replacement with new Stridsvagn 2000 models. But in 1982, budget cuts led to a different decision: modernize the existing tanks instead. They developed the D version, the most ambitious upgrade, with a new gas turbine, missile defense systems, thermal imagers, advanced fire control, and additional armor. One prototype of Stridsvagn 103D was built, but the project was ultimately shelved due to the end of the Cold War, the Soviet Union's collapse, and reduced military budgets. Sweden then decided to buy foreign tanks. In 1991, a tender was announced, with the American M1A2 Abrams, the German Leopard 2, and the French Leclerc. Leclerc won the competition, with Abrams second and Leopard 2 initially disqualified due to being in development. In 1994, Sweden leased 160 used Leopard 2 A4 tanks under the designation Stridsvagn 121, waiting for the newer Leopard 2 A5, which would become Stridsvagn 122. Before decommissioning the old Stridsvagn 103, the military conducted one last experiment. In the late 1990s, at a training ground in Kvarn, 7 Stridsvagn 103 tanks defended against 7 new German Leopard 2 A4 tanks. The result was astonishing. The 30-year-old obsolete tanks defeated all 7 modern Leopards, losing only one in the process. Their low-profile, rapid-fire autocannon and quick repositioning behind cover gave them a decisive advantage in defensive combat. But this was the swan song for Stridsvagn 103. In 1997, the tank was retired, not because it performed poorly, it never saw actual combat, but because modern tanks featured thermal imaging, computerized fire control, and precise firing on the move. The Stridsvagn 103, with its 105mm gun and analog systems, was simply outdated. 30 years of service is an excellent achievement for any tank, and for such an unusual design, it was extraordinary. The story of Stridsvagn 103 is unique. Engineer Sven Berg proposed a crazy idea, a tank without a turret, and managed to convince an entire country to build 290 of these machines. Everyone predicted failure, but the tank proved so successful that it served 3 decades and even won a final battle against its successor. So what's the secret? Why did this strange machine turn out to be viable, despite the fact that no other country dared to repeat the Swedish experiment? The answer lies in Sweden's specific defense conditions. Sweden was not preparing for desert warfare or plains. Its battlefield was the forests, hills, and lakes. In such terrain, the ability to quickly occupy advantageous positions, deliver precise strikes, and retreat was more important than firing at maximum range. For these conditions, a low silhouette, high rate of fire, and the ability to quickly retreat backward proved more effective than a rotating turret. Stridsvagn 103 became the world's first serial gas turbine tank, ahead of the Soviet T-80 and the American Abrams. Its hydropneumatic suspension for gun aiming inspired other designs. The automatic loading system and reduced crew concept also influenced future innovations. This tank, once considered a dead end, prefigured many technological solutions of the future. Today, several Stridsvagn 103 tanks are displayed at the Swedish Army Museum Arsenal, all operational, including the only prototype of the D version. They stand as a testament to a time when a small neutral country challenged all conventions of tank design and won. Sven Berg proved that sometimes the craziest ideas are the most enduring. If you enjoyed this story about the strange Swedish tank, please like and subscribe to the channel.